Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever been trapped in a feeling so intoxicating that it felt like love, but deep down you knew it was slowly destroying you? That magnetic pull towards someone who barely gives you anything, yet somehow controls everything inside you. You tell yourself it's connection, but it's not. It's addiction. It's the mind chasing the high of maybe while your heart begs for peace. Today, I want to talk about that spell. Not love, but limerence. And how to break free from the cycle that keeps you craving the one who was never truly yours. And limerence, that intoxicating, consuming, almost obsessive feeling that convinces you someone is the missing piece of your soul. It's that rush that takes over your mind the moment you think of them, the surge of emotion that hijacks your logic, your peace, and your sense of control. You find yourself constantly replaying their words, analyzing every glance, decoding every message, and living in this suspended reality where the possibility of their affection dictates your worth. You tell yourself it's love, but deep down, you know it feels more like a fever, burning, relentless, and exhausting. And it begins innocently enough, a spark, a connection, a moment where you feel truly seen. They say something that hits a hidden part of you, and suddenly the world feels brighter. You start imagining a future with them before a present even exists. Every interaction feels monumental. Every silence feels devastating. And in the quiet moments, your mind becomes a movie reel of fantasies. What they'd say if they truly knew you, what life could look like if they chose you, how incredible it would feel to be theirs. But the truth is, you're not in love with them. You're in love with the potential of what you want them to be. And limerence thrives in uncertainty. It feeds on the in-between, the almost, the maybes, the mixed signals. When someone gives you just enough to stay hopeful but not enough to feel secure, your brain becomes addicted to the chase. You're no longer responding to love. You're responding to dopamine. Every little hit, a text, a compliment, a glance, feels like proof that maybe this is it. But when the distance returns, you spiral. You start wondering what you did wrong, how to win them back, how to make them feel what you feel. And that's the cruel trick of limerence. It gives you highs so intoxicating that you'll endure any low just to taste it again. You start to confuse longing with love, anxiety with passion, and unpredictability with chemistry. And because limerence often forms around emotionally unavailable people, you end up stuck in a loop where your desire for connection is met with inconsistency. You try harder, give more, sacrifice your boundaries, all to maintain a fantasy that's never fully real. But here's the truth, no one tells you, limerence isn't about them, it's about you. It's about what part of you they awaken. It's about the validation you crave, the wounds you haven't healed, the belief that if this person finally sees your worth, it will mean you are finally enough. But what if they never were the answer? What if their attention isn't the prize you think it is? What if the real power was always in you? The part that still believes in deep connection, the part that still wants to love, the part that still hopes. And breaking the cycle begins the moment you stop trying to make them the solution to your emptiness. You start by facing the truth you've been avoiding, that you've built an entire emotional world around someone who exists mostly in your imagination. You fell in love with their potential, not their consistency, with their charm, not their character, with the way they made you feel seen, not with the way they made. You feel safe. You've confused intensity for intimacy, and it's time to separate the two. And real love doesn't feel like chaos. It doesn't leave you checking your phone every 10 minutes or questioning your self-worth after every silence. Real love has space for peace. It gives you stability without boredom. It grows in presence, not absence. The kind of love you deserve doesn't keep you guessing. It reassures you. It doesn't make you compete. It chooses you. It doesn't demand that you lose yourself. It helps you find more of who you are. And so how do you break the cycle? You start by reclaiming your attention. Limerence thrives where your focus goes. So every time you catch yourself drifting into a fantasy, bring yourself back to reality. Ask yourself, what are they actually giving me? Not what you hope they'll give, not what they could give. What are they giving right now? If the answer is confusion, mixed signals, or emotional distance, that's your truth. Don't romanticize it. Don't justify it. See it for what it is. And then redirect that energy inward. The same intensity you pour into analyzing their every move, pour that into understanding yourself. What does their attention represent to you? Is it validation? Is it a sense of being chosen? Is it the comfort of replaying a pattern that feels familiar, even if it hurts? Every answer brings you closer to breaking free, because the moment you become aware of the wound that keeps you trapped, you begin to heal it. And you also have to detox. Limerence, like any addiction, requires withdrawal. That means distance, emotional and physical. It means not checking their social media, not looking for signs, not replaying old conversations for hidden meaning. It means tolerating the discomfort of letting go and trusting that clarity will come through the pain, because it will. The fog lifts when you stop feeding it. And when it does, you begin to see how much of your peace you've sacrificed in the name of what if. You begin to see that love shouldn't make you question your worth. It should remind you of it. You begin to understand that what you were chasing wasn't them. It was a feeling of being wanted, seen, enough. And that feeling is something you can build within yourself. And there will be moments when you miss them, not because they were right for you, but because they represented hope. You'll crave the highs. You'll remember the way your heart raced when they said your name. But remember this, missing them doesn't mean you made a mistake. It means you're human. It means you felt deeply. It means you care. But caring doesn't mean staying stuck. It means choosing growth over fantasy. And as you move forward, start noticing who brings you peace instead of chaos, who makes you feel grounded instead of uncertain, who listens to understand instead of to respond, who shows up not when it's convenient, but when it matters. Those are the people who can meet you where you are. Those are the people capable of building something real. And in time, you'll look back and realize that limerence was never a curse. It was a mirror. It showed you the parts of yourself that still needed love. It showed you your hunger for connection, your vulnerability, your hope. It showed you your courage to feel, even when it hurt. And once you start giving that love to yourself, the attention, the care, the compassion you were begging from someone else, you'll find the cycle loses its grip. And because the moment you stop trying to earn love that isn't freely given, you become free. You start to see that love isn't supposed to consume you. It's supposed to expand you. It's not meant to be chased. It's meant to be shared. And the person who truly deserves you won't leave you questioning if you're enough, and they'll make you feel like you always were. And then when you finally understand this, something inside you begins to shift. You start to see how much of your time, your energy, your self-worth you've spent trying to decode a puzzle that was never meant to be solved. You stop looking at their silence as a challenge to overcome and start seeing it as an answer in itself. You begin to notice how much of your identity became tied to the fantasy of being chosen by them, and it hits you. You've been auditioning for a role that doesn't even exist. You've been waiting for a story that was never written for you. And you realize that the ache you feel isn't about them. It's about the space they filled, the one inside you that longed to be seen, adored, and understood. That's why it hurts so deeply when they pull away. It's not just the loss of their attention, it's the loss of the dream you built around them. You're mourning an illusion, and that illusion felt real because it spoke to something sacred. Your desire to love and be loved in return. But love, real love, isn't meant to feel like chasing a mirage. Real love doesn't demand that you lose yourself just to keep someone interested. And the truth is, the person you become in limerence isn't your most powerful self. It's the version of you that bends, molds, and performs just to fit the story in your head. You shrink your needs, you silence your doubts, and you convince yourself that if you can just be more patient, more understanding, more everything, they'll finally see you. But you were never supposed to convince anyone of your worth. The right connection doesn't need convincings. It recognizes you without negotiation. And breaking free means reclaiming the version of you that existed before them and the one who had dreams, purpose, and peace without needing their validation. It means understanding that closure doesn't come from their apology or their explanation. Closure comes from your acceptance. Acceptance that this connection, as powerful as it felt, wasn't built to sustain you. Acceptance that wanting them doesn't mean they were right for you. Acceptance that your healing won to come from trying to rewrite what never belonged to you in the first place. And then the moment you stop fighting reality, you reclaim your power. You stop asking, why didn't they choose me? And start asking, why did I keep choosing someone who couldn't meet me? You stop chasing meaning in mixed signals and start finding meaning in self-respect. You stop idealizing the way they made you feel in fleeting moments and start building a life where you feel fulfilled consistently. And every time you think of them and that familiar pull starts to rise, remind yourself that what you're craving isn't them. It's the chemical rush of uncertainty and hope colliding. It's the fantasy of resolution. It's the thought that maybe, just maybe, they'll wake up and realize what they lost. But what if the real awakening isn't theirs? What if it's yours? What if the point of this entire experience was to wake you up to your strength, your standards, your ability to love deeply, and your need to protect that love from people who only offer confusion in return? And that's where your freedom begins, in the realization that you don't need to be chosen to feel worthy. You don't need to be validated to feel lovable. You don't need their attention to feel alive. You are already whole, even when you've been made to believe you're not. And yes, letting go will hurt. It will feel like ripping your heart out of a story you still want to believe in. But healing isn't about forgetting them. It's about remembering yourself. And you start doing small things that remind you of your own power. You take your mornings back. No more checking your phone the second you wake up hoping for a message. You take your nights back. No more scrolling through old conversations trying to relive what once made you feel special. You take your peace back. No more internal debates about what they meant or why they changed. Each small act of reclaiming your energy is a declaration. I am done making someone else the source of my joy. And slowly something incredible happens. You start to feel lighter. You begin to laugh again without wondering if they'd find it charming. You start to dress for yourself, speak for yourself, dream for yourself. You realize that the attention you were begging for from them, you can give to yourself in infinite ways. Through growth, through self-expression, through surrounding yourself with people who genuinely show up for you. And then one day you see them, maybe in person, maybe on a screen, maybe in your mind, and you feel something different, not the ache of longing, but the calm of clarity. You don't need their words to explain what happened, because you finally understand. You were never unworthy of love. You were just investing it in someone incapable of holding it. And now that you know what that looks like, you'll never mistake chaos for connection again. And the greatest lesson Limerence teaches you is how powerful your imagination is, and how dangerous it can become when it's used to build castles on shaky ground. But once you learn to use that same imagination to build your own life, to picture your future, your goals, your peace, you stop searching for magic in other people. You start becoming the magic yourself. And because the truth is, the intensity you felt in Limerence isn't something to be ashamed of. It's proof that you are capable of feeling deeply. It's proof that your heart hasn't gone numb. It's proof that you still believe in connection, even after being hurt. That's not weakness, that's courage. The key is learning to give that depth of love to someone who meets it, not someone who merely triggers it. And you'll start noticing how your standards change. Where you once chased attention, you now crave consistency. Where you once romanticized potential, you now value presence. Where you once settled for being almost enough, you now hold out for someone who chooses you fully. You start seeing love not as something to earn, but as something to build. Together, mutually, respectfully. And when that kind of love finally finds you, it won't feel like limerence. It won't send you into panic or keep you guessing. It will feel calm, grounded, and safe, almost unfamiliar at first because it won't demand your anxiety to sustain it. But you'll know it's real when you can breathe without fear of losing it, when you can be fully yourself without performance, when love feels like peace, not like chasing oxygen. And still, don't rush to fill the silence. Don't jump into the next connection just to prove you're over the last one. Sit with yourself, learn the rhythm of your own company, because the more comfortable you become being alone, the less likely you are to mistake intensity for intimacy again. Alone is not empty. It's sacred space. It's where you rebuild your sense of worth, redefine what love means to you, and decide who gets the privilege of sharing your energy next. And as you grow, you'll realize that the same passion that once made you cling can now make you unstoppable, that the same intensity that once trapped you in longing can now drive you toward purpose, that the same heart that once chased love can now lead with strength. You'll use what once broke you as fuel to create, to connect authentically, to live freely. And because one day you'll meet someone, maybe a friend, maybe a partner, who reminds you that love doesn't have to be painful to be powerful, you'll laugh without fear, share without pretense, and finally feel the balance you were always meant to have. And it will hit you. The love you were chasing through limerence was never out there. It was always waiting within you, buried beneath the illusion that someone else had to awaken it. And that's when you'll stop craving the rush of being desired, and start cherishing the peace of being understood. You'll stop longing for someone to fill your emptiness and start building a life that overflows on its own. You'll stop defining love by the way it makes your heart race and start defining it by the way it makes your soul rest. And in that peace, you'll finally find what you were searching for all along. Not them, not a fantasy, but freedom. And as that freedom begins to take root, you notice something subtle but profound. You stop needing love to prove your value. You stop measuring your worth by how someone responds to you, how much attention you receive, or whether they reciprocate your feelings. You begin to understand that love isn't about filling a void, it's about sharing your wholeness. And for the first time in a long time, you feel a sense of peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. You realize that you no longer crave the roller coaster. You crave the calm. You no longer want to be addicted to highs and lows. You want to live in balance. And that's when you start living differently. You wake up and your first thought isn't about them anymore. It's about you, your growth, your joy, your purpose. You start noticing beauty in ordinary moments again. The sound of laughter that doesn't come from your phone, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the quiet of your own thoughts. When they're no longer consumed by obsession, you realize how much mental space you've reclaimed simply by no longer renting it out to someone who never paid attention. And it's not that you stop caring altogether, it's that you start caring differently. You care about yourself with the same intensity you once cared about them. You give yourself patience instead of pressure. You offer yourself understanding instead of judgment. You forgive yourself for the times you chased confusion instead of clarity. And that forgiveness becomes your liberation. Because the truth is, breaking free from limerence isn't just about letting go of a person. It's about letting go of the version of you that thought you needed to be chosen to matter. And every moment you spent longing for them was a lesson in your capacity to feel. But every moment you spend now focusing on you is a lesson in your capacity to heal. You begin to build boundaries, not walls, because you've learned that protecting your peace doesn't mean closing yourself off to love. It means refusing to accept chaos as a substitute for connection. You no longer chase someone who makes you question where you stand. You attract those who make you feel seen without effort. And with time, something even more beautiful happens. You start noticing patterns, not in them, but in you. You realize that the part of you drawn to unavailability was really just seeking familiarity. Maybe you grew up believing that love had to be earned or that affection was conditional. So when someone came along who was unpredictable, it felt like home. But now you see that your old definition of love was based on survival, not fulfillment. You were replaying a script written long ago, and now you have the pen. You get to rewrite it. And you start to understand that the thrill you once mistook for love was really anxiety dressed as excitement. You mistook tension for chemistry, inconsistency for mystery, and distance for depth. But once your nervous system calms, you begin to crave something different. Not the person who keeps you guessing, but the one who makes you feel grounded. Not the one who gives you temporary highs, but the one whose presence feels like home. And the cycle breaks the moment you decide that peace is more valuable than passion that drains you. That's when you start choosing differently. You start walking away from what's inconsistent without needing an explanation. You stop trying to make someone see your worth and instead surround yourself with people who never make you doubt it. You begin to see that love doesn't have to feel like losing control. It can feel like coming home to yourself. And as that awareness deepens, you start feeling compassion. Not just for yourself, but even for the one who couldn't meet you. You see that their inability to love you wasn't a reflection of your inadequacy. It was a reflection of their own limits. They gave what they could, even if it wasn't enough for you. You can grieve that truth and still be grateful for what it taught you, because they were never the destination. They were the mirror that showed you what still needed healing within. And you start looking back and seeing the moments you once romanticized for what they were. Crumbs of affection that you turned into a feast because you were starving for love. But now you're not starving anymore. You're full, not from anyone else's attention, but from your own self-respect. You no longer settle for crumbs because you know you deserve the whole table. And then you start to realize something even more powerful. You don't have to hate them to move on. You don't have to erase the memories or pretend they meant nothing. You can honor the experience for what it was without clinging to what it wasn't. You can appreciate that it awakened something inside you, even if it wasn't meant to last. Because every person you meet on your journey serves a purpose. Some to love you, some to challenge you, and some to wake you up. And then maybe that's what this was, your awakening. The moment life asked you to stop outsourcing your happiness, the moment you stopped confusing longing for love, the moment you realized that the love you were so desperate to receive from someone else is the same love you've been capable of giving yourself all along. And from that space, you begin to glow differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself with quiet confidence, because you no longer seek to prove anything. You no longer chase anyone because you've learned that anything you have to chase will only run away again. Instead, you attract naturally, effortlessly, magnetically, not because you're performing, but because you're aligned. And the more you align with your worth, the less appealing emotional chaos becomes. You start saying no, not from bitterness, but from clarity. You stop entertaining people who treat you like an option. You stop mistaking attention for affection. You stop investing energy in trying to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer fight for someone's effort because you've realized effort should never be begged for. It should be mutual. And it's not that you become cold or detached. You simply become discerning. You start to value emotional maturity over temporary attraction. You start to crave connection that feels like growth instead of addiction. You want love that deepens, not one that depletes. You realize that it's not about finding someone who completes you. It's about sharing your completeness with someone who respects it. And then as if by magic, you begin to attract people who mirror that new energy. People who communicate clearly, who are consistent, who make you feel safe instead of anxious. They don't play games because they're not trying to win. They're trying to build. And when that happens, you see just how far you've come. You realize that everything you went through, the obsession, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, was preparing you for this version of you, the version that no longer settles for intensity over intention. And because now you know, real love doesn't take from you, it grows with you. It doesn't ignite fear, it inspires peace. It doesn't demand proof, it earns trust. It doesn't drain your spirit, it nourishes your soul. You see that love is not supposed to feel like losing yourself to keep someone else. It's supposed to feel like finding more of yourself alongside them. And then even if you haven't met that kind of love yet, you're no longer waiting for it from a place of emptiness. You're preparing for it from a place of fullness. You're not hoping someone will save you. You're building a life so beautiful that anyone who joins it will simply add to it. You're no longer chasing, you're creating a future, a peace, a love that aligns with who you've become. And because when you finally break the cycle of limerence, you don't just free yourself from a person, you free yourself from the illusion that love must hurt to feel real. You start to live in a way that honors your heart instead of exhausting it. And that's when you realize that the most beautiful love story you'll ever experience isn't the one where someone finally chooses you, and it's the one where you finally choose yourself. And when you finally choose yourself, the world around you begins to shift in ways you never imagined. You notice that your standards start to rise effortlessly, not because you're trying to be difficult or guarded, but because you've experienced the cost of settling. You've lived through the exhaustion of waiting for someone to love you the way you deserved, and you've learned that no amount of patience can make someone emotionally ready who isn't. You've seen what it feels like to pour your energy into someone who only ever gave you fragments of theirs, and you've decided you'll never go back to living on emotional breadcrumbs again. You want a love that feels mutual, intentional, and steady, not one that keeps you chasing shadows. And you start to see your past not as wasted time, but as training. Every heartbreak, every obsession, every unanswered message was preparing you to recognize the difference between attention and connection, between being desired and being valued, between someone wanting to have you and someone wanting to build with you. You begin to understand that love without emotional maturity isn't love at all. It's longing dressed up as romas, ants. And the person you become after realizing that, that's someone unstoppable. And you stop viewing your vulnerability as weakness. You start seeing it as your superpower, because feeling deeply means you can connect deeply. It means you care enough to invest. It means you're brave enough to hope again, even after disappointment. But now you pair that depth with discernment. You no longer hand your heart to anyone who simply makes you feel seen. You give it to those who make you feel safe. You don't confuse intensity with intimacy. You know the difference now. And when people enter your life who can't match that energy, you no longer chase them. You no longer question what you did wrong. You simply release them. Not from bitterness, but from peace. You understand that not everyone is meant to meet you where you are, and that's okay. You're not meant to convince people to love you correctly. The right ones will do it naturally. The wrong ones will teach you why standards are necessary. Either way, you win. And the beauty of breaking the cycle is that it gives you back your emotional freedom. You no longer live on the edge of anxiety, waiting for a text, waiting for closure, waiting for them to change. You live in the present again. You find joy in your own company. You build a life so fulfilling that anyone who steps into it becomes a complement, not a completion. That's the shift. When love becomes a choice, not a need. And you start setting boundaries that once terrified you, because you realize they aren't walls, they're gates. Gates that let in what's right and keep out what isn't. You start saying no to people who only offer half effort, because you finally understand that half effort love leads to full-time pain. You no longer confuse availability with compatibility. You don't settle for someone who occasionally remembers your worth. You choose someone who never forgets it. And in those quiet moments when you reflect, you realize how far you've come. You remember the nights you stayed up replaying their words, trying to find meaning in their silence. You remember how many times you told yourself that maybe, just maybe, things would be different if you were more patient, more understanding, more perfect. But now you can look back and smile because you see the truth so clearly. You were never too much. You were simply trying to love someone who was never ready to receive it. And you begin to feel gratitude, not for the pain itself, but for what it taught you. It showed you what love is not. It showed you what you should never again accept in the name of connection. It showed you that the person who's meant for you will never require you to lose yourself in order to keep them. That love will never thrive in confusion, inconsistency, or fear. Real love feels like exhale, steady, easy, whole. And then the more you embody that truth, the more your life begins to align with it. You start attracting opportunities, people, and experiences that reflect your growth. You notice that your relationships, romantic or not, become richer, deeper, and more authentic. Because now you show up differently. You no longer seek validation. You bring validation with you. You no longer need someone to make you feel enough. You live as someone who already is. And you start realizing how powerful it feels to walk away from anything that doesn't serve your peace. To say, this isn't love, and mean it. Even when your heart still aches, you realize that self-respect sometimes looks like heartbreak, but it always leads to healing. You understand that letting go isn't a sign of giving up. It's a sign of choosing yourself. It's a declaration that your worth will never again be determined by how someone else treats you. And as you move forward, you start seeing love differently. It's no longer about finding someone who fills the silence. It's about finding someone who can sit in it with you. It's no longer about the one who excites your insecurities. It's about the one who soothes them. It's no longer about who makes your heart race. It's about who helps your soul rest. Because you've learned that passion without peace is chaos, and chemistry without compatibility is confusion. And you begin to embody a quiet kind of confidence, the kind that doesn't need to prove or perform. You walk into rooms differently because your worth no longer enters with someone else's approval. You've stopped searching for reassurance in someone's words because you've built that reassurance from within. You've become your own source of emotional security, and that changes everything. And then one day you'll meet someone, not when you're desperate, but when you're ready. Someone whose presence doesn't reignite your old patterns, but redefines what love means entirely. They won't make you feel addicted to their attention. They'll make you feel safe in their consistency. They won't give you highs that leave you empty. They'll give you peace that feels full. And when that moment comes, you'll recognize it instantly, not because it feels like fireworks, but because it feels like alignment. And even if that day hasn't arrived yet, you're already winning. Because you've broken the cycle. You've learned to see the difference between infatuation and connection, between fantasy and reality, between being chosen and being valued. You no longer confuse emotional intensity with emotional intimacy. You understand that love doesn't need to be chaotic to be real. It just needs to be honest. And you've learned that healing isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming unshakable. You can still feel, still hope, still love, but now you do it from a place of power. You can give your heart freely without losing your balance. You can be vulnerable without being blind. You can love deeply without letting that love define your entire identity. That's the balance that sets you free. And then the truth is, this freedom doesn't make you hard, it makes you whole. It gives you the strength to keep your heart open without letting it be your undoing. It teaches you that love is not supposed to cost you your peace, your sleep, your self-esteem. It's supposed to add to who you already are, not take away from it. You understand now that love isn't found in the longing, it's found in the alignment. And you stop chasing people who confuse you because you know that confusion is not chemistry. It's a warning. You stop waiting for people to change because you understand that someone else's growth is not your responsibility. You stop believing that being patient with chaos is the same as being loyal to love. You learn that real loyalty begins with yourself, with protecting your energy, your time, and your heart. And then as you continue walking this new path, you'll find moments where the old patterns try to whisper again, when nostalgia sneaks in, when you wonder, what if? But this time, you won't fall for the illusion. You'll smile at the memory, thank it for the lesson, and keep walking, because now you know the truth. Peace is too valuable to trade for temporary comfort. Growth is too sacred to sacrifice for attention. And you've reached a point where you no longer fear being alone because you've discovered the strength in solitude. You've learned that solitude isn't loneliness. It's sovereignty. It's the space where you rebuild your power, your clarity, and your purpose. And once you've known that kind of peace, you'll never again settle for anyone or anything that disturbs it. And because the person you've become after breaking the cycle of limerence is someone extraordinary, someone grounded, aware, and free, someone who doesn't chase illusions anymore but creates reality, someone who doesn't wait for love to complete them, but shares love from their wholeness. Someone who finally understands that the greatest love story they'll ever live begins the moment they stop looking outward and start coming home to themselves.